In recent days, a pattern of events unfolding across different parts of the world has begun to reveal a church that is not erupting into open crisis, but moving along visible lines of tension that no longer remain confined to private discussions. These are not speculative claims or rhetorical battles. They are concrete actions, documented in public, which when placed side by side sketch the outline of a church navigating unresolved questions about authority, continuity, pastoral practice, and unity. In Poland, in the city of Kobylka, Bishop Athanasius Schneider publicly celebrated Mass according to the traditional Roman rite at the Church of the Immaculate Conception. He was assisted by priests of the priestly fraternity of St. Peter. In itself, the celebration of the older liturgy is legitimate. Yet context matters. The traditional rite remains subject to restrictions and varying interpretations depending on region and episcopal authority. Its public celebration by a figure such as Schneider inevitably carries meaning beyond the liturgical act itself. Schneider is not a marginal voice. For years, he has intervened consistently in debates surrounding doctrinal continuity, the crisis of authority within the Church, and the role of the liturgy as a concrete expression of received faith rather than an adaptable instrument. His presence at the altar in Poland was therefore read not merely as a pastoral gesture for local faithful, but as a signal directed toward broader ecclesial leadership. In a climate where the traditional liturgy continues to function as a symbol of deeper theological concerns, the act resonated beyond the walls of that church. If you haven't subscribed, click on the subscribe button so you don't miss out on future videos like this, because what you're about to hear is not just news, it's a wake-up call for every heart that still believes truth should burn brighter than silence. Now grab your rosary, quiet your spirit, and let your heart listen, not just with ears, but with faith. A few days later, in Warsaw, Schneider gave a conference addressing the challenges and hopes facing the Church under the pontificate of Pope Leo XIV. The content of the talk mattered less than the fact that such reflections were already being framed publicly during the early phase of a new papacy. Every new pontificate generates expectations. Some look for clarity, discipline, and visible continuity with what has been handed down. Others look for pastoral flexibility, adaptation, and new approaches to long-standing situations. When a bishop associated with the language of doctrinal firmness speaks openly at such a moment, it becomes clear that the debate is not dormant. It is active and visible. While these discussions were taking shape in Eastern Europe, another event in South America introduced a different but equally consequential development. In the Archdiocese of Corrientes, Argentina, a priest celebrated a marriage on January 28 after consulting Archbishop José Adolfo Larraín. The Archbishop determined that, based strictly on biological sex, there were no canonical impediments to the marriage. One party was a biological man who publicly presents as a woman. The other was a biological woman who publicly presents as a man. Canon law, focused on biological reality, did not identify an obstacle. The complexity arose not from the biological assessment but from what followed. During the ceremony and in official documents, the names publicly adopted by the couple were used, not the names recorded on their baptismal certificates. The baptismal records retained the original names, but the liturgical rite and public documentation reflected the chosen names. The priest conducted the ceremony entirely using these adopted names. One of the spouses later praised the decision as a gesture of respect. Photos and videos circulated quickly through local media and social networks. What might once have remained a local administrative matter became widely visible. The Sacramental Act entered public debate. The issue was not primarily about intentions or personal sensitivity. It centered on precedent and coherence. Church registers are not symbolic archives. They are juridical documents that produce legal and sacramental effects over time. A baptismal certificate anchors a person's sacramental identity within the Church. Marriage records rely on that continuity. When publicly adopted names are used in liturgical and official contexts without altering sacramental data, a practical tension emerges. On paper, the biological and sacramental framework remains intact. In lived practice, a different set of identifiers operates. The concern is not about the personal situation of one couple alone. It is about how principle and application align. Once a practice is carried out publicly and documented, it becomes a reference point. In ecclesial life, precedents carry weight. They shape expectations. They influence future decisions. A diocese's choice today can quietly become another diocese's starting assumption tomorrow. As these local developments unfolded, attention in Rome focused on a meeting that could carry broader implications. According to multiple sources, Father Davide Pagliarani, Superior General of the Society of St. Pius X, was expected at the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith for discussions with Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez. There was also the possibility that two bishops of the Society, Bernard Feliti and Alfonso de Gallarita, might attend. The Society of St. Pius X occupies a unique and sensitive position within the Church. Founded in 1970 by Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, it was established to preserve traditional priestly formation and liturgical practice amid the reforms that followed the Second Vatican Council. Tensions with Rome escalated over time, culminating in 1988 when Lefebvre consecrated 4 bishops without papal mandate. That act created a canonical rupture of historic consequence. The event remains a defining trauma in modern Church history. Since then, relations between Rome and the Society have moved through phases of tension, dialogue, limited concessions, and partial normalization. The Society's canonical status has been described as irregular. Its priests have, at various times, received faculties for confession and marriage under specific conditions. Yet full reconciliation has not been achieved. Trust remains fragile. In recent months, rumors resurfaced suggesting the possibility of new episcopal consecrations by the Society without papal mandate. Under canon law, such an act would entail severe consequences. Whether those rumors reflect actual plans or simply anxiety within certain circles, they frame the context of the current dialogue. A meeting at the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith is not routine diplomacy. It touches questions of apostolic succession, ecclesial authority, and visible communion. The possible presence of Bishops Feliti and de Gallarita at the meeting carries symbolic weight. Engaging bishops means engaging the question of continuity and governance at its core. The memory of 1988 lingers. Every gesture is interpreted against that backdrop. Silence itself becomes meaningful. A renewed fracture would not be viewed as an isolated dispute but as the reopening of an old wound. When these 3 developments are considered together, the public reaffirmation of the traditional liturgy by a prominent bishop, the pastoral decision in Argentina establishing a new practical precedent in marriage records, and renewed doctrinal dialogue with a historically estranged priestly society, a picture emerges of a church operating along parallel tracks. Each track addresses a different pressure point. Yet none of them exists in isolation. The traditional liturgy functions not merely as a ritual preference but as a symbol of continuity, authority, and theological stability. Pastoral decisions at the diocesan level test how canonical principles are applied in complex personal situations shaped by contemporary cultural realities. Doctrinal negotiations with the Society of St. Pius X confront unresolved tensions about interpretation of the Council, obedience, and unity. None of these developments constitutes a sudden rupture. There has been no dramatic decree or sweeping doctrinal shift. Instead, the tension appears structural. It is embedded in the daily life of the Church. It becomes visible when local actions are placed side by side. The pontificate of Leo XIV forms the immediate backdrop to these events. Still in its early phase, it already faces expectations pulling in different directions. Some seek firm clarification and visible reaffirmation of inherited doctrine and liturgical identity. Others emphasize pastoral responsiveness and engagement with contemporary realities. The new pope has not yet defined the long-term trajectory of his governance. Yet the events unfolding under his watch generate pressure that will eventually require articulation. Facts, more than statements, are shaping the present moment. A Mass celebrated publicly according to the older rite. A marriage recorded using adopted names. A meeting scheduled between Rome and a society long in irregular status. Each fact, considered alone, may seem manageable. Together, they outline unresolved questions. How does the Church hold together a universal doctrinal framework while local pastoral decisions generate practical precedents? How does it integrate or reconcile groups formed around resistance to post-conciliar reforms without reopening old fractures? How does it ensure that sacramental records and public practice remain coherent when cultural understandings of identity are shifting rapidly? These questions are not abstract. They are embodied in real dioceses, real bishops, real faithful. The tension is not ideological theater. It is administrative, sacramental, juridical, and pastoral at once. The Church has historically lived with internal debates. Councils, reforms, and disciplinary adjustments have always required time and discernment. What marks the current moment is not the existence of disagreement but its visibility. Social media amplifies local decisions. International travel allows symbolic gestures to carry global resonance. Meetings in Rome are analyzed instantly by observers across continents. In such a context, the absence of synthesis becomes more noticeable. When one bishop publicly emphasizes liturgical continuity, another diocese publicly adopts a pastoral application that appears innovative, and Rome simultaneously reopens dialogue with a group formed around resistance to reform, observers perceive divergence even if formal unity remains intact. The structural tension does not necessarily imply impending collapse. It does indicate a phase of discernment in which multiple pressures converge. The direction taken will not be decided by commentary but by concrete decisions, permissions granted or restricted, documents issued or withheld, faculties extended or limited. The memory of past fractures, especially 1988, serves as a reminder that decisions about authority and communion carry long consequences. Precedents, once set, shape future debates. A marriage record today may become a reference point tomorrow. A liturgical celebration today may embolden or reassure communities elsewhere. A meeting in Rome may either reduce suspicion or deepen it. For now, the Church proceeds along these parallel paths. The lines of tension are not hidden. They are visible in actions rather than declarations. The early stage of a new pontificate leaves space for interpretation, but not indefinitely. At some point, synthesis must move from expectation to articulation. Until then, the unfolding events remain what they are, concrete, documented, and interconnected. They do not announce a dramatic rupture. They reveal a Church navigating complex realities without yet offering a unified response that satisfies every expectation. The outcome remains unwritten, but the pressures shaping it are already in motion. If this message touched your heart, like this video and share your thoughts in the comment Amen and stay with us. More Eucharistic stories, deeper reflections, and holy insights are on the way. May Christ in the Eucharist be your light, your rest, your truth. Amen.